They took his land, 1,500 acres, gone, stolen by the very people who were supposed to protect the community. But here's the part they never expected. He didn't fight with fists, he didn't beg for justice. He fought with the law, and when the dust settled, he wasn't the one left empty-handed. The HOA was, because this black man found a way to legally sell their homes right out from under them. This isn't just a story about a land dispute. It's about power, greed, history, and a man who refused to be silent while his family's legacy was ripped from him. It's about how one black landowner in Texas flipped the script on an entire homeowners association. You're about to see how a community that thought they could play God over his life got humbled in the one place they never expected, the courtroom. And if you think that sounds wild, wait until you hear exactly how he did it. Let's start with the land. 1,500 acres. To some people that's just a number, but let's be real, 1,500 acres is everything. It's wealth, it's power, it's legacy. It's a piece of the earth that can't be replaced. For black families in America, owning land isn't just about farming or ranching. It's about survival. It's about proving that no matter how many systems were built to keep you down, you can still carve out a space of your own. This man, we'll call him Mr. Johnson, had that space. His land had been in his family for generations. He grew up watching his grandfather ride across those fields on horseback. He learned to fix fences, care for cattle, and respect the soil under his feet. That land was his bloodline. But when developers started sniffing around the area, when suburban expansion began creeping closer and closer, suddenly his land became more than just his. It became valuable. Too valuable for some people to believe it should still belong to him. Enter the HOA. The homeowners association in this case wasn't just a board of neighbors arguing about lawn heights or paint colors. This was a powerful group with ties to developers, city officials, and money. The kind of people who see land as a commodity, not as heritage. And when they looked at Johnson's 1,500 acres, they didn't see his family history. They saw dollar signs. At first it started with pressure. Letters, calls, offers. Why don't you sell to us? Why not take the money and move somewhere else? But Johnson stood firm. He wasn't selling. Not for $1 million, not for $10 million. Because once you sell your land, you sell your roots, and you can't buy that back. But the HOA didn't take no for an answer. They got sneaky. They found legal loopholes, manipulated documents, twisted zoning regulations. And in one of the boldest, dirtiest moves imaginable, they went behind his back and sold his land. Illegally, fraudulently, as if they had the right to decide what happened to his family's property. Imagine waking up and finding out your land, the land you worked, the land your grandfather died on, was gone. Taken, paperwork filed, titles transferred, and you had no say. That was Johnson's reality. And for a lot of men, that would have been the breaking point. That would have been the moment they snapped or gave up or disappeared under the weight of injustice. But not Johnson. He was angry, yes. He was hurt, absolutely. But most of all, he was focused. Because if they wanted to play dirty with the law, then he was going to fight back with the law. And that's when the real story begins. Johnson didn't just march into court and demand justice. No, this wasn't the kind of fight you win by walking in angry and shouting. He knew that if he wanted to take down an entire HOA, an organization that thrived on bureaucracy and paperwork, he had to beat them at their own game. That meant patience. That meant precision. That meant building his case brick by brick, like stacking stones into a wall that no one could knock down. So he started with the basics, the paper trail. For weeks he barely slept. Every night after working his land, he sat at the dining room table with stacks of old documents, titles, deeds, surveyor maps, anything with his family's name tied to those 1,500 acres. He traced the history of the property back through generations. He dug into archives, courthouse records, even yellowed, handwritten notes from his grandfather's time. It was painstaking work, the kind of work most people wouldn't have the patience for, but Johnson wasn't most people. He had something the HOA didn't, a reason to fight. They were motivated by greed. He was motivated by legacy. And as he pieced things together, he started noticing something strange. The HOA's paperwork didn't add up. They had filed property claims that overlapped with his land, but the boundaries were inconsistent. Survey maps from one month didn't match the next. Some signatures looked off, sloppy, too perfect in places and shaky in others. Johnson's gut told him what his eyes already suspected: forgery. But suspicion wasn't enough. He needed proof. That's when he started interviewing neighbors, old ranchers, even former HOA employees, anyone who might have seen something or heard whispers. And oh, did they whisper? One former secretary admitted she had seen board members rush paperwork late at night, just to get it done before deadlines. Another remembered board members joking about how Johnson was too stubborn to sell, and how they'd find a way to handle it. Piece by piece, the puzzle started coming together. The HOA wasn't careful. They weren't disciplined. They were arrogant, and arrogance leaves fingerprints all over everything. Johnson studied their bylaws too. He read them cover to cover, highlighting sections, scribbling notes in the margins. The rules they were supposed to follow were crystal clear, but in their greed, they had cut corners. They had held meetings without proper notice. They had voted on actions without a quorum. They had ignored mandatory procedures for land transactions. Everywhere he looked, Johnson found violations. Not just small mistakes, but major breaches. Breaches that invalidated entire decisions. Breaches that stripped them of legal authority. And the deeper he dug, the more blatant it became. He found documents with forged signatures, people who were supposed to be present at meetings who later swore under oath that they had never attended. He found property filings stamped on days when the county clerk's office had been closed for holidays. He found land assessments inflated by phantom improvements, things like community parks and retention ponds that didn't even exist on the ground. It was a goldmine of arrogance and carelessness. And yet the HOA carried themselves as though they were untouchable. They thought nobody would ever call them out. They thought Johnson was just another black man in the South with no resources, no voice, no power. They assumed history would repeat itself, that like so many before him, he would be bullied into silence, stripped of his rights, and left to fade into obscurity. But they were wrong. Johnson wasn't just a rancher, he was a strategist. He knew the system was rigged, but he also knew how to turn the system on itself. And unlike the HOA, he didn't rush. He didn't act carelessly. He moved with precision. He worked with lawyers who specialized in property law, people who had gone up against HOAs before and knew their weaknesses. He handed over every file, every record, every inconsistency he had uncovered. And as his lawyers pored over the evidence, their eyes widened. This wasn't just one or two mistakes. This was systemic fraud, a pattern of abuse so bold it bordered on criminal. But Johnson wasn't chasing revenge. He wasn't trying to see people locked up. He wanted something bigger, justice. The kind of justice that wouldn't just punish the HOA but flip the power dynamic entirely. That's when the legal team discovered something explosive. Because of the HOA's repeated violations, they had actually forfeited certain rights. Under Texas law, when an HOA acts outside its charter, when it breaks its own bylaws and violates state regulations, its claims to property and assets can be challenged, even dissolved. That meant the very houses the HOA controlled, the community properties under their ownership, could be put at risk. Johnson realized something almost poetic. The HOA had illegally sold his land, but by exposing their misconduct, he now had the legal right to sell theirs. Imagine the power of that discovery. The same people who tried to erase his legacy were now in danger of losing their own homes. The same group that laughed at him, dismissed him, underestimated him, now faced the possibility of watching everything they built crumble in front of them, all legally, all by the book. And Johnson didn't waste time. He moved methodically, filing motions, presenting evidence, using the HOA's own arrogance as ammunition. With every hearing, every deposition, the case grew stronger. Witnesses flipped. Board members stuttered under oath. Lawyers squirmed as documents were presented showing clear fraud. The courtroom became a battlefield, but Johnson wasn't fighting alone. His ancestors were in that room with him. Every black farmer who had lost land to lies and theft was standing behind him in spirit, and the HOA could feel it. Their swagger started to fade. Their shoulders slumped. For the first time, they realized they weren't in control. Johnson had taken back the narrative. He wasn't the victim anymore. He was the hunter, and the HOA was the prey. And the most incredible part, he never had to raise his voice. He never had to stoop to threats or violence. He let the truth speak for itself. He let their arrogance bury them. By the time the dust settled, everyone watching could see the truth plain as day. The HOA had tried to steal from him, but in their greed, they set themselves up for their own downfall. And Johnson was the man who made sure justice was served. To really understand the weight of this story, you have to step back. Because Johnson's fight wasn't just about him. It was about every black farmer, every black rancher, every black family who ever lost land through trickery or force. After slavery ended, black families across the South worked tirelessly to buy land. That land was freedom, a way to step outside the control of the old systems. But almost as quickly as they gained it, the land was stolen back through violence, lynching, shady contracts, predatory loans, and yes, fraudulent sales. Entire towns were wiped off maps. Generations were cut off from wealth they had built with their bare hands. So when the HOA came for Johnson's land, it wasn't just business as usual. It was history repeating itself. It was another chapter in a long book of land theft. And that's why Johnson's response mattered so much. He wasn't just saving acres of soil. He was saving dignity. He was saving the proof that his family's struggle wasn't for nothing. And when people in the community saw what he was doing, they rallied. Neighbors who once stayed quiet started whispering encouragement. Families who had lost land before started seeing a spark of hope. Because if Johnson could win this fight, maybe, just maybe, others could too. And if you think that was powerful, wait until you hear what happened when the final verdict came down. Now picture this moment, the courtroom, silent, tense. HOA members sitting in their suits, trying to look confident but sweating through their collars. Lawyers whispering, shuffling papers. Maybe they still thought they had a chance. Maybe they thought their money and influence would carry them through. And then Johnson walked in, calm, steady, determined. He didn't need to posture. He didn't need to play games. He had the truth. He had the law. And when the judge banged the gavel, when the final decision came down, it was crystal clear. The HOA had acted illegally. They had no claim to his land. And because of their actions, their own assets were now on the line. The shock in that room must have been priceless. The realization that the man they tried to strip of everything was now the man holding their future in his hands. Some say the HOA president's face turned red. Others say board members immediately started yelling at their lawyers. But none of that mattered. The law had spoken. The homes were gone, and the power they thought they had was stripped away in an instant. And when those homes started changing hands, when families in the neighborhood realized the HOA couldn't protect them anymore, the balance of power shifted forever. The hunted had become the hunter. The powerless had become powerful. And the so-called guardians of the community were exposed for what they really were, bullies who finally got humbled. Johnson's story isn't just about one man winning against an HOA. It's about the bigger picture. It's about centuries of land theft, from Reconstruction to Jim Crow, from sharecropping to redlining. It's about the way black families have been stripped of land again and again, sometimes by violence, sometimes by shady paperwork, sometimes by so-called community rules. But this time, the ending was different. This time, The man they underestimated refused to fold. He fought back with intelligence. He fought back with patience. And he reminded everyone watching that land, legacy, and dignity aren't things you can just take without consequences. In the end, Johnson didn't just protect his family's land. He made history in his own way. He showed that when you know your worth, when you refuse to bow down, when you use the system that was meant to break you as a weapon instead, you can turn the tables completely. It's poetic justice, the kind of story that feels almost too perfect to be real, but it happened, and it left a mark that no HOA will ever forget. Click here to watch the next story. You won't believe it.